If you love cold brew coffee, stick around. I'm going to show you how to make it better than your coffee shop does. If you're a coffee drinker, then yes, you've probably had cold brew coffee. But are you making it from home? Well, I'm going to show you a few different ways to make your own cold brew coffee, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks, whether you're brewing it hot at first or whether you're actually using a cold brew coffee maker. Check this out. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to make iced coffee. So no matter what your brewing method is, you have a way that you can get it done. So the first way I'm going to show you is the cold brew method. See this right here? This is a cold brew coffee maker. The next way I'm going to show you is from hot to cold. And this is my Bodum. You've probably seen me use this before. I'm going to show you how to do it using a hot to cold method. And you can do this whether you're using a French press or a traditional coffee maker at your own home or at work, whatever you want. And then the other way I'm going to show you is if you don't have a proper coffee maker at all, I'm going to show you the mason jar method, using a mason jar just like this. And it's pretty darn cool because you can now have coffee any way you want, no matter what your method is. So first, let's start with our cold brew coffee maker. All right, I'm gonna move all this stuff out of the way so you can get a full shot of this method. What you're gonna need is your coffee grounds. I'm gonna explain in just a minute why I have 2 different containers of that here. You're also gonna need some fresh water. I prefer not to use tap water because it's got the chlorine in it. It's been treated very heavily. I like to use spring water, so that's what I have here. If you don't have spring water, go for filtered water, but you do need I guess for lack of a better term, you need good water to get it done, or it's not going to have that clean, fresh flavor, I don't think, that you always get when you go buy coffee in the shop. All right, and you're also going to need your little coffee measure here, so you can make sure you're getting accurate measurements for your coffee. I'm going to move this out of the way so I can show you my cold brew container. Check this out. This is by the company Coffee Bear. I did a lot of research online, and I'm going to show you how this works. See this top here? You just take the top off, you unscrew this lid. There's your container there. And inside you have this. This is obviously your filter, and it just comes off just like that. All right, so the first step is going to be to fill your filter with your favorite coffee. Now, when I make cold brew coffee, I like it regular, but I also like to have the kind that has a little bit of flavor. So I like to use 2 different kinds of coffee. Whether I'm drinking my coffee hot or cold. Is that a little much? Maybe for some people, but coffee's like a ritual for me, and I enjoy the process, and I want it to taste delicious. So when I use flavored coffee, sometimes it just feels like the flavor is too strong. And I'm also very particular about how I sweeten my coffee. Either I'll have no sweetener in it at all, or I will use honey to sweeten my coffee, which is a little tricky when you're doing cold brew. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. But here's what I like to use. I like to use good quality coffee. I don't get the cheap stuff. This is what I buy. I'm in Washington, D.C. This is roasted just outside of DC in Rockville. So it's a local company that I'm supporting, but what I like the most about it is that it's non-GMO, it's organic, and they also have some that is, I believe this is fair trade also, manufactured with 100% wind energy. And then they also, what I love the most is they feature the farmer on the back. I just want to make sure that the products that I'm buying are good quality. This one actually says they bypass middlemen that do not add value but take profit from the farmers. So they actually market directly to the farmer instead of going through other big businesses. Anyway, that's a whole other separate topic, but that's what I buy. And I like to do half of this, which this is beans, so I grind these fresh every morning when I'm making a hot cup of coffee. And then this is the other one that I get. This is obviously more mass produced, but I have trouble finding a flavored coffee that is locally produced. So I buy this one at Target. This is fair trade. This is organic. And this is the vanilla flavor that I love. There's also, I believe Wegmans also has a vanilla coffee. I also like hazelnut. I just happen to have vanilla on hand. So that's why I have 2 different bowls of coffee grounds here, because this is the just plain regular coffee, and then this is the vanilla coffee. Now, very much like when you use a French press, when you're using this, you don't want it to be like a super fine powder like you might find in other grocery stores. So you want to make sure it's relatively coarsely ground coffee when you fill this up, because you don't want to have that kind of soot in the bottom of your coffee maker once it's done brewing during the time it has to brew. So also what's different about cold brew coffee is it does have to brew longer than a hot cup of coffee would. A hot cup of coffee, you can brew it in a few minutes, you're good to go. Cold brew coffee, this has to brew, they say 12 to 24 hours. So you definitely want to make this ahead of time if you want to enjoy your cold brew coffee all by yourself, or if you're serving it to guests. All right, let's get started. So the directions on this, and this is not my recommendation, this is what actually here, you can see it here. This is what came with the cold brew coffee maker. And they say to fill this up halfway with your coffee grounds, and then to fill this up with 2 cups of water, and then to fill it up the rest of the way with the coffee grounds, and then the rest of the way with water. So I'm going to go through that process for you. And they also say that there's a process that you need to use to make sure the coffee grounds are all wet, make sure there's no dry ones in there. So you have to stir it a certain way. So I'll get into all that as I go, but let's get started. All right, first we are going to fill this up with the coffee grounds. And like I said, I'm going to do about half and half, because sometimes the vanilla flavor is just too strong if I use all vanilla. So I do half and half. And I do the same thing with my hot coffee as well. And if you want to know the exact measurements to do this, so you have to do it at home, just scroll down below and I'll make sure that I have those measurements for you in case you're wondering exactly how much. And if you don't have this type of coffee maker at home. So here's the trick to this. So this is the top. You see how that works? And you just put it in there until it just kind of slides in. So you see these grooves here? Those grooves are on there, and then there's some little places in here where they fit in. So you do just like that, and that way it's in there securely. And next, I'm going to put this right on top of there. Get my hand out of the way. There we go. Up next, we're going to pour 2 cups of water slowly over the top of this core to make sure all the water, or all those coffee grounds, are completely soaked. So I'm going slow to make sure that I'm not making a mess, and to make sure I do what they tell me to do. Let's see, is that 2 cups? Oh, perfect. We're right at 2 cups. Okay, so you can see there that that's just still way at the bottom, and if you look in the top, you can see those coffee grounds are pretty well soaked and they're in there good. Now the directions say to fill the rest of that core with the rest of your coffee grounds. So at this point, for me in particular, this is when I switch to the other flavor. So like I said, and I spilled a little bit on the side there. So let's just try to get as many in there as we can, or we'll pretend like that didn't happen. So now you fill up the rest of the way. So I have a flavored coffee, but it's not out of control, you know, with flavor. And some people prefer, they like to put like the syrups in there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest of this in there too. There we go. Some people like to get the syrups in there, or different flavors at the coffee shop. Hey, you do you. Do what you gotta do. I prefer, like I said, not to have it super sweet, so I have my own method, and this is it. All right, so we have this core filled up, you see there, with those coffee grounds. And then it says to continue pouring the water slowly over the coffee until the glass pitcher is completely full. So I just did 2 cups, and now I'm gonna continue to fill this up the rest of the way. And I'm going slow here. You can see those coffee grounds kind of rising up. If I went too fast, they would spill over, and then the grounds would get into my coffee, and that's what we don't want to happen. So you have to go nice and slow, and I'm going to let that sink down. a good bit until all that water is as far out of there as it can get. And I will say, you probably noticed, boy, that was a lot of coffee that you put in there. And it is a lot of coffee. I noticed when I started doing this that, man, that is a lot more coffee than what I use when I brew my coffee in the morning in my French press. But I'm guessing that is because it's cold brew. So you need a lot more coffee to get that flavor to steep. And even though it does sit longer, my guess is that because it isn't heated, that it takes more coffee to get that flavor to come through the cold water, which is fine by me. I mean, it's worth it because I'm telling you, it is absolutely delicious. Now this is where you have to practice patience because this is getting more filled up. It doesn't, the water doesn't strain as fast, and you're going through your, it's going through the coffee, so it takes a little bit longer. Now, this is one of the methods that they recommend to getting your coffee, to making sure the coffee is all wet and to make sure that it all gets to steep well. This is a chopstick, and this is the perfect thing to use to get down into that core. If you don't have one of these, look, this is just one from a takeout restaurant that I happen to have extra sitting around, or you can use a butter knife. I would recommend, no matter what you use the thicker end, because that way you'll make sure you don't bust through the bottom of your filter, because once you do that, it's over. You don't want that filter to bust. All right, hey, there I am. Hello. So check this out. I'm gonna pour this water in. It fills up to the top, nice and easy. I'm gonna take the larger end of my chopstick. I'm just gonna gently put it down in there to make sure, look how much faster that's draining, to make sure all of those grounds are saturated. Again, I'm being very gentle. See there? Look at that. Now I'm gonna add in more water. Does it take patience? Yes. Is it worth it? Oh, yes. Trust me. I'm a self-proclaimed coffee snob, and this is absolutely delicious. And by the way, perfect for summer if you ask me, because whether you're in air conditioning or not, I love having cooler drinks in the summer as opposed to hot drinks. I mean, I'll have a hot cup of coffee, but man, iced coffee in the summer, oh, it's my favorite. Okay, so that should be our last little bit. And that's going to slowly make its way down. Like I said, we're going very gently. And now it's all filled up. I want to make sure all those grounds are in the water because that's where our flavor is, right? So I try to make sure I get as many out of the top as I can. If there's a few left, I don't sweat it, but check it out. See? And this is how it's going to look at the end. Those grounds, you can see them sitting in the water. I'm going to top that off just a little to make sure, because they probably will absorb some more water. And that's that, right? You put your top on. Check that out. You guys, you have no idea. I mean, I'm telling you. Excuse that reflection there. It really doesn't look like that. That's really weird. I've got a cutting board back on the other side of this camera, and it's white, and it's making that weird, it's like shining on the core. It doesn't look like that normally. You can't even see it from my angle. That's really kind of neat. Anywho, there's that. I don't think that's the core. I think that's just a reflection on there. Anyway, there's your cold brew coffee. This goes in the fridge for 12 to 24 hours, believe it or not. I usually make mine like right after dinner. So let's say 6, 7 o'clock. And then the next morning when I get up, it's there and it's delicious. All right. So what I do the next morning, sometimes I might just keep it in here and pour it right out. Other times, if I just want to get this cleaned up and ready to go, because I do, hold on, I skipped a part. You don't want that core to stay in there. So in the morning, when you wake up, take this off, right? You're gonna go like that, and there's your coffee, and then you're just gonna go like this to remove that core. Okay, looky there. It twists right off just as easily as it twisted on. Okay, I'm gonna put it back on there though because I need that to brew for my 12 to 24 hours. All right, so there we go. And then you can either leave it in the container, which is just fine, or if you don't want to keep it in this container, what I do sometimes is I transfer it to another container. This is just it was like an empty milk, like what is that, a quart of milk that I got at the store, and I love the little container, so I kept it. You can return it if you want and get like this little, I think it's a $1 or $2 deposit back, but I liked it because I thought, ooh, I can use that. So clearly this was my cold brew that I made last night. There was some left, so that's why it's not filled up, because I had my cold brew this morning. It was so good. Oh, anyway, you can transfer it over to there, or you can keep it in here if you want, whatever floats your boat. So there is method number 1. This you can do with all the other methods if you want, however you want. Okay, let's move on to method 2. Method 2 is going to be a quickie because I'm not going to go through the whole process. This is my French press that I could just give it kisses. I mean, I love my French press. I have a video on how to make coffee without a coffee maker. If you want to find that video, I'm going to link it above, either, let's see, where am I? Either here or here. Wherever. I'm going to link that for you so you can see it. And I'll also make sure I have it at the end of this video so you can access it easily. But it's 2 ways to make coffee without a coffee maker. Okay, is this a coffee maker? Yes, it's a coffee maker. I should have said without an electric coffee maker because this is what I use. I don't even have like a real electric coffee maker. I consider this a real coffee maker. Some people do, some people don't. This is what I use every day. I show you how to use a French press. If you want to use this to make cold brew coffee, no, you cannot use cold water. You have to brew a hot cup of coffee just like I show you how to do in the video. And I'm not kidding. I'll walk you step by step on how to do that. So you use this. The trick is that you have to cool it off if you want to have cold brew coffee. So you're going to go through the process of making a hot cup of coffee in here, and you can cool it off immediately with ice. You pour it into another container and you let it cool off and you put it in your refrigerator, however you want to do it. Don't put that steaming hot coffee into a glass container and then put it into your freezer because it will probably crack that glass. So what you need to do is you need to let it come to room temperature, then put it, or close to room temperature, maybe even lukewarm, then put it in another container with a lid that screws on tightly, please, so you don't have a big fat giant mess, and then tell me all about it. And then you have to let it cool off that way. Pop some ice in there and then move on. Now, the trick is the difference with cold brew and hot. If you're adding a sweetener, like me specifically, I'm adding honey to mine, or even if you're adding sugar to yours, you want it to be able to dissolve. And if it's really cold, you're not going to get the dissolve action like you normally would. So if you're adding a sweetener to your cold brew coffee and you're using this method, you're going to need to do it while the coffee is still hot. So if I ever use this method, I add my honey while the coffee is still warm or hot so the honey can dissolve, and then I go through the cooling process that I just explained. If you're using the cold brew method that I just did and you want to sweeten with honey like I do, that gets a little bit tricky too. You're going to have to heat up a little bit of the coffee from the cold brew, the method I just showed you. Hold on. Like this, I have right here is totally cold. I might take a 1/4 cup of this. This is a process, but this is what I do because I like to sweeten mine with honey, if I even sweeten it at all. Sometimes I just skip it and don't sweeten it all. But if you do want to add in some honey and you need it to dissolve, once you've used the cold water, cold brew method, I'll heat up maybe a 1/4 cup. And then, like in my microwave, a 1/4 cup with a tablespoon of honey, and then I'll add in the rest of my coffee and the rest of my creamer. Some people, so they don't have to go through all that, will get something that's already sweetened, like this is a creamer here. This is actually a raw macadamia and coconut creamer that you can just add. You can get a flavored creamer if you want, so you don't have to worry about whatever sweetener you're using dissolving, or you can skip the sweetener altogether and just add in your half and half, or your milk, or whatever it is that you, or your cream, whatever you add to it, you can go that way. Or there's some people that just like to drink their coffee black. So hats off to you if you do that. That was my thumbs up there. Wait, there, thumbs up. Hats off to you if you drink black coffee. I haven't graduated to that yet. I don't know that I ever will, but you got to get a little creative when you're using, if you like to sweeten your cold brew coffee, because it's not going to dissolve the same way. So if you're using sugar or honey like I do, you may very well have to heat it up a little bit once it's cooled, or if you're using this method, put your sweetener in there before you cool it off. So you go from hot, you get your sweetener in there, and then you cool it off. That was an absolute mouthful, but it's true. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, leave me a message down below, and of course I'll answer, because that's how I roll. Okay, let's get into the last method. Now, in the video that I mentioned when I showed you how I make my hot cup of coffee, one of the other things I showed you was the strainer method and how you can make a hot cup of coffee using the strainer method. You can do the exact same thing with cold brew coffee, and I'm gonna show you how. Because I like fresh ground coffee, I did just grind this up, and as you can see, I hope you can see it, it's pretty coarsely ground. Again, you don't want it to be like espresso, and you don't want it to be small grounds, because it'll get in your coffee. Okay, so got a little dusty there. I do recommend that you grind your own coffee fresh though. If you buy, you can't, I've never seen coarse ground coffee pre-bagged in the store. You can get your own coffee and you can grind it in the store if you don't have your own. This cost me, I think, 20 bucks. You can get them for 15 bucks. You can get them even cheaper. I do recommend, and this is where I went wrong with this one, if you're grinding your own coffee, get the kind that doesn't have this lid like I have. This is the Krups brand. Is it? Where is it? I think this is the Krups brand. And I bought it from a fancy schmancy little store, and I thought I was doing something big getting the Krups brand. And then I realized that the cup doesn't come out. You want the kind that has a removable cup, because then you can just dump it into wherever you're going. You know, so much easier. This, the lid is this way. And what I'll do sometimes, let me just show you. It's probably going to make a mess. Which, oh yeah, look, it is Krups. Yep, I was right. So you can go like this. God, please don't make a huge mess. Okay, not bad, right? You can go like that and get it out that way. But it's so much easier just to remove the little cup, you know, instead of going through that process. Anyway, you get my drift. So I have my little measuring thingy-majigger here, measuring cup. I'm not really, oh, look at me. Because I bake, I tend to level stuff off. You don't have to do that. Ignore that part. However, whoops, however strong you like your coffee, you're gonna put your grounds in there. Now, I'm gonna, again, like I said, I'm gonna put these exact measurements below so you can find exactly what the amount that I'm using. But in general, the rule of thumb is the stronger you like your coffee, the more grounds you're gonna use, okay? If I liked it super strong, I would add on all that. I do like my coffee to have its good coffee flavor, but not out of control. Let me just wipe this mess up. Sheesh, Bambi. Okay. Now, we've got this, our grounds in there, and then you're gonna add your cold water. And you're gonna pour that straight in. Now you're probably thinking, girl, what are you doing with this coffee? Just hang with me. I'm gonna show you. Okay, and remember before, when we used our chopstick, we're gonna do the same thing, okay? You're gonna use that to make sure all those grounds are saturated with the good water, and then you're gonna go from there. Next, hold on, I'm gonna wash my hands real quick because they are an absolute mess. And up next, you're gonna put on your lid. I have my mason jar lid here. Whoops, it's this one. And you're gonna go like this. If you wanna get all wild and crazy, you can give it a little shake to make sure everything is in there good. Now, remember we talked about how to brew your coffee. You're going to brew, again, the same way you did the cold brew method. You're going to brew for 12 to 24 hours. This is going to go right in your refrigerator. 12 to 24 hours, you're going to have delicious cold brew coffee. But the next step, of course, has not been 12 to 24 hours later, but let's just pretend that it has. I'm going to show you what your next step is. 12 to 24 hours later, pretend like you're at this step. Remember this little guy that I showed you earlier? You're going to sit that right on top if you want. Now, some of these little, this is just a strainer, right? Some of these, the holes are smaller or bigger than others. Some people get absolutely disgusted if some of the grinds get in there, grounds, if they get in there and settle to the bottom. I personally just skip that last sip because it is gross, but I don't mind if it's down in there. I just skip it. But you can put some cheesecloth in here. You can put a coffee filter in here. You can do whatever you want to keep those coffee grounds from getting into your coffee. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to take this cold brew and you're going to strain it. You can strain it into a larger cup, or you can strain it into a larger container that you're just going to put the lid on and put away. I'm just doing it here for the purpose of showing you the process, right? Look at that. That, my friends, would be your cold brew in the morning. But you can't do it that fast. Hot cup of coffee, yes. Cold brew, you gotta let it brew, right? It's called brew for a reason, because you have to let it brew. And look how cute. Look how that says coffee. Oh, I love this little mug. Anyway, there it is. Some people want to go through this process a few times, okay? You can go through ever how many you want. But then you're gonna add in your creamer and go through the process and have your delicious coffee in the morning. How do I like to do it? Hold on, I'm gonna show you. I like a latte. That's kind of my thing. So you're gonna take your cold brew. You're gonna pour it. Look, I like to have the cup filled with ice already. You don't have to have the ice because it's cold already. Whatever you want. I like to pour that in. If I remember what I explained, if you were putting honey or sugar in and you didn't put it in if you use the hot method, or you didn't put it in there, you can't put it in there when you're brewing with the cold, because the sugar or the honey may not dissolve. I don't do sugar, so it might. I'm thinking that it won't. But if you are doing the cold brew method, you may have to heat up just a little bit of this to make your sweetener dissolve, and then start from here, okay? Like I said, I hope that makes sense. But here's what I like to do. I put in the cold brew. If you want it to be stronger, you add in more grounds and you let it brew longer. This was about 12 hours that I let this one brew. And then I add in, this is 2% milk. Oh, but you can do half and half, which if you're not from the States, it's a thing here. It is half creamer, half regular milk. You guys, this is my cold brew latte. Oh. There was my stick, if you want to stir it up with a chopstick. I usually just use my straw to stir it. You guys, so darn delicious. Hold on. It's perfect. There's a little vanilla in the background. Some people would be like, oh, it's so milky. But like I said, I'm a latte girl. This is what I like. And I hope you try this method. Sweeten it however you want, make your own concoction, but try the cold brew coffee, because then you won't have to go spend $1 bazillion in the stores, and then you can make a comment below that says, thanks, Bambi. And I'll say you're welcome. Cheers. So I hope you enjoy that. I know I do. Cold brew coffee is delicious, but you just have to make it the right way. So when you make it, make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, and we'll probably be having our cold brew coffee together. Thanks for checking in with me today. I'll see you next time.